Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sticking around the end of the day, and I know that it's just because the cocktails are at 5 o'clock, but we're happy you're here anyway. This session is the business of streaming television, emphasis on business. We're going to try to talk about how streaming television works and makes money and why it's different and why it's the same as television. This particular session is produced by the Interactive Media Peer Group of the Television Academy. The TV Academy are the nice folks that bring you the Emmys in prime time. And the Interactive Media Peer Group deals with the advanced side of television, everything from VR and AR and MR to OTT and SVOD, social, second screen, all of those sorts of things. And we award Emmys in 5 categories to a diverse group of folks that nominate their content. And so if you're interested, if you didn't know that those things were included in TV and were eligible for Emmys, please come see me, or if there's any of the other Emmy TV Academy members, come by and see if you'd like to join. It's actually really very interesting and very worthwhile. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about business of streaming media. We have a really interesting and I think information-full, if that's a word, panel. It's a little different than what was in the brochure. We've had to swap some people out due to everything from knee surgery to emergency trips to headquarters. But I think you're going to find that we're really very well represented, everything from the broadcast side, the measurement side, platform side, independent OTT and global, and even some representation from the standards bodies. So we're going to cover a lot of different things here. I wanted to set the tone excuse me, with 3 quick slides. The first one, pardon me, first one is, and again, I'm standing next to the person that actually cares about numbers, so the fact that these numbers may or may not be exact are not as important as the trends here. But is that in the last year, the amount of time spent with OTT multimedia devices and television have about crossed. TV's down about 34% since 2012, thereabouts, and Caroline can tell you some more about that, and OTT consumption has gone up. So the business that we think of as television is becoming IP delivered more and more, and things that are being IP delivered are becoming more and more about television. Second is the penetration of televisions themselves. Nearly half are now connected, and that will grow significantly, and BI Intelligence says that by 2019 we're going to see about 63% of TVs connected to the internet. And finally, on the business side, where's the money going? The blue bar is legacy television, and the orange bar is the spend that goes into OTT. The bar to the far side is 2015, and the second bar is projected by TDG in 2018, with a decline excuse me, in legacy television spend and an increase in OTT television spend. Which brings me to my first question for the panel, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves and we'll come back. And that first question is going to be, so then what really is television? But first, let me allow each of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll come back and we'll kick it off with that question. So, Caroline?
Hi, I'm Caroline Horner. I oversee product for television and cross-media measurement at ComScore. We get data from all box office receipts worldwide. We get about 24 million households of television data, all VOD data, and census-based digital. I also have panel assets as well. So what we do is create video and movie and content measurement for basically the full spectrum of video and television.
Helge?
Hi, I'm Helge. I used to be a documentary producer in the 90s, and in the next decade I built up the biggest OTT service in Northern Europe, TV2 Sumo, and saw that this was incredible fun, and the way it just transitioned the media industry in and triggered a lot of others to do the same in Northern Europe, and basically fueling an acceleration of the moving from linear television to OTT in Northern Europe. I saw that instead of being a big fish in a small pond like Norway, it would be much nicer to be a small fish in the big ocean where the currents are changing. So we decided to spin out a company called Viman Media Solutions. And we're working with some of the bigger media brands in the world like Comcast and Reuters and iFlix here by my side on their strategy to win the television viewing of the future, which is incredibly exciting. And last year, I took my family and moved from Norway to the US because I think the US market is ripe for change, and I think it's happening right now. And it's incredible to be able to be part of what's happening here with an outside view and be like assisting people who really want to make a difference in getting them achieve what they want.
Okay, Ash?
My name's Ash Creek. I'm the CTO of iFlix. We have an SVOD business in Malaysia, which is catering to emerging markets. We're in the Philippines and Thailand. We launched to the public in June of last year, and by the end of the year, we had 1 million paying subscribers, growing pretty fast. By the end of this year, we hope to be in a lot more countries, but we're really focused on emerging markets. So America is probably not one of the countries we'll be going to anytime soon. Well emerged. Yeah, that's us.
Chris?
Chris Faulkner with NBC Broadcasting. I work on advanced TV, which is kind of a broad bucket. One piece of that, though, that's probably of interest to this is helping our affiliates to roll out our TV Everywhere product, which is across multiple devices, and connected TV devices.
And you also have another role.
Oh, and my other role, I also am the co-chair of the Advanced TV Committee for the IAB. Most people, when they think of the IAB, think internet digital standards, whether that's display or video ads, technology, the V suite of ad technology that is kind of how all of the advertising on the web works, as well as some measurement and standards and policy things. So I help co-chair a committee that is really about the convergence of that legacy digital, and I love using legacy with digital, it's fun, and legacy TV, and it's really the intersection of those two things as we get to whether it's over-the-top IP-delivered TV or advanced advertising products that may be running in the more traditional linear television footprint or ecosystem, whether that's interactive type ads or addressable ads or things like that.
Great. So to my first question, so how do we define television? What is television these days, or what will it be? Who wants to go first?
I'll
Caroline?
take the pass, so next time we'll start at the other end. From television is no longer obviously the box. It is in some manner video. Coming from one side of the continuum, you have assets or content that was produced at a very high level for television, and one of the terms that we're using more often is extended TV to account for all the other distribution points and viewing opportunities that asset is now seeing all the way through on the digital platforms, whether it's over the top or mobile implementations. The video as a user-generated content is also coming up the stream and being repurposed in higher and higher production and scale distribution. So our definition is that it's inclusive of both, but there's some single source interest in a TV asset that extends beyond what was television. It's a very different marketplace than those who are aggregating a lot of disparate video into packaging. So the business side of it acknowledges the two areas that are coming together.
Okay, Helga, you have a thought?
I think it's funny. I just moved to, I'm a bridge and tunnel guy now. I live in New Jersey, Jersey, in a ridiculous house. And I got like a 70-inch screen, a 65-inch screen, a 55-inch screen, a 50-inch screen, and a cinema.
We're all going to his house after this.
And I have 3 kids and a wife, and my whole life has been in television. As I said, I used to be a documentary producer, and my kids love television. But the funny thing, though, is we don't spend a minute watching any content on any of these screens through traditional cable. Not a single minute. Not a single minute per day, per week, per month, not at all. In fact, the only reason we have a cable box is because it's cheaper to get the triple play than a single play through our Optimum service. And this is not because I work in this space. It's because, and I've been studying my kids since they grew up, and I'm looking at the way they are just picking this fresh. They're not changing their behavior. They're more or less just defining their behavior because they get this opportunity that the rest of us has to learn. And the way they just embrace the way they watch television in a totally different way that we're used to. And I see funny things. I see my 15-year-old curled up on the couch in front of a 70-inch screen. And he's watching a drama series on his iPhone 5. Home Alone. He could, and we have a 5.1 audio system. It's just amazing quality. And he could really experience this as loud as he wanted and in total peace with himself. But he's curling up with his personal device and watching his drama series. It's just funny. It's not that he only does that, but the fact that he does that is just amazing.
So Ash and Chris, I'm going to extend it and say tell me not only what TV is, but what is different about TV on broadband, so if I'm watching Scandal on my phone, that's a TV. That's a TV experience. But if I'm watching a YouTube clip on my 50-inch screen, is that a TV experience? And how do we differentiate? Is it quality? What is it? What's the difference?
This probably shows my legacy television background. Sorry, folks. We could generally consider TV to be long-form, professionally produced content, and that doesn't mean that something on YouTube couldn't be long-form and professionally produced, and maybe then it's TV. I would say that House of Cards is TV. I would say those are professional, long-term things. I think. Short form clips, even if they're professionally produced, we produce digital shorts for Saturday Night Live and things like that. I don't necessarily consider those TV.
That was going to be one of my questions. Does a Fallon clip count as television?
We look at that more of a digital video asset because that's where you're gonna primarily see it. You're not going to see a linear channle made up of 2-minute clips. Right. So I think that's just kind of an arbitrary line we've drawn. So.
Ash, you have a thought?
Yeah, I see TV as pretty simply defined. It's video delivered over any medium to any device in the form of entertainment for the watcher. So, and as Helga was saying, it's moved to a far more personal experience these days with the more devices that we have and the different distribution mechanisms and primarily obviously the growth, and maybe this shows my infancy in this area, but we see the internet as probably one of the most powerful ways of distributing TV.
Oh, I'll agree with you on that. I don't care where it's delivered. I don't care if you're watching it on this or on apparently his killer media room. His 127-inch TV. I don't think that matters. I don't differentiate where and how it's delivered. I think it's more of just I think it's about the content itself. I don't know that a 30-second YouTube video of a cat is television.
Yeah,
even if he chooses to watch it on his 150-inch, it keeps getting bigger.
On his 200-inch, right.
Yeah,
so can TV be defined? Go ahead.
I just want to throw for me, television, not because I grew up in the agency world as a buyer and then a seller when I was at Dish, but the television always meant to me that it was ad-supported. It wasn't until we had the HBO came in and some other devices came in, in the 80s, I guess for me, that it became more like a movie experience or was absolutely different. But to me, television means it's ad-supported to a greater or lesser degree.
Okay. Well, and that was going to be my next question. I just wanted to point something out. If you don't follow it closely, there's now over 110 TV OTT services, of which we all subscribe to 3 or 4. But there's about 110 of them. Twitter is now going to broadcast NFL Is that TV? Of course it is. Spotify is creating original programming like everyone else is. In fact, there's over 410 scripted shows in production this year, almost 3 times as much as there was 10 years ago. 410 shows, which is great for the production community. You know, everybody's out there, good for the talent, good for the production, but it's an awful lot of content to consume. If you all don't have queues of stuff to watch at home, I'd be surprised. All kinds of services. A lot of them are SVOD. Some of them are ad-supported. Crackle has just announced an ad-supported service, so that's why I want to come back to that. And then we've got things like the Sling TV service, which is like trying to be what we used to have, except we're going to deliver it a different way. So there's a lot of different kinds of TV. So can we define TV by advertising? Can we define TV by what ad buyers buy or could buy? Because ad buyers would buy House of Cards if they could, but they can't. But can we define it that way? Does that make sense? Okay.
Do we need to define television? Or is the fact that television is being so transformed these days that it doesn't make sense to speak about television anymore? And one of the fundamental things that you said here is that there are now like hundreds of providers, probably, of OTT services. And that's the fundamental change. So whatever screen, if it's the big screen or the small screen or whatever, there is no longer one single entity controlling what you're able to choose from on that screen. And you basically have the freedom to choose between a lot of different providers. And that's changing the game. That's radically changing the game.
I think there is a difference, at least in the engagement metrics that I see. Folks will tend to watch television for a longer duration. The TV will be on for a longer duration.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas personal devices, you see much shorter engagement. And so I think and also part of it's the connectivity issue, right? At home, you have connectivity, whereas when you're mobile, it's hopping a lot more. So I think the quality of the engagement that happens is related. I think TV can be more related to the duration of the viewing session or experience at this point.
And we see that with our customers or partners, as we call them. With their services, we see pure OTT services, a much more loyal audience in terms of viewing time on the big screen.
Yeah.
But it's still delivered in a way where you really are not in control of what the viewer wants to watch. You have to just be really good at what you're doing in order to hope that they will choose you, which is a dramatic change.
What I find amazing is seeing the kids who watch YouTube, watching other people play games, and that's their entertainment, and they'll watch that for hours on end, and they'll be engaged for significant periods of time. So it really is interesting to define what is engaging entertainment when you start to see what I think is probably one of the most bizarre things ever, to watch other people play games. And anyway, it is the way it is.
PewDiePie has half the subscription of Netflix globally, right? So,
one of the things that the duration is the idea that if you watch channel changing behavior, it'll often happen at the end of a show, but basically the best predictor of what a rating's going to be is who was watching the show right before it, right? So people don't change the channel as much as they do, whereas in the over-the-top and digital experience, that decision is a very different variety of choices as soon as that asset's done. What's curious is that the Netflix, and even some of the other OTT services are re-upping they're starting the next programming as you finish that one, so to perpetuate the viewing on channel for longer.
TV
I think
invented
you're
the hot
absolutely
switch a long time ago. Netflix is just discovering it, right? So there's lots of services out there, and let's talk about the business part of that. So there's 2 ways that people get and pay for television. You either pay for it on a subscription service, or you pay for it with your time watching ads, right? Almost all the new services that have come out in OTT are all subscription services. Crackle, the first significant one that's come out, is ad-supported. Why is that?
Well, I mean, we're exclusively SVOD, so it's probably easy for me to give our perspective.
Well, 109 out of the 110 are, so you're in good company.
We find that the proposition to the consumer is very easy. with subscription video on demand. You know, and there's only one customer, and that is the person who purchases it. It's not necessarily having two sometimes competing agendas between the advertiser and the consumer. So we found that we just wanted to keep the proposition as simple as possible with the consumer, and that's one of the reasons why we went for that model.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, in TV Everywhere, you're kind of doing a little bit of the both parts there, right? I mean, you're delivering it with ads, but you kind of have to pay for it by being a subscriber to a pay TV guy.
Yeah, so TV Everywhere certainly is born out of the legacy TV model, which was if you wanted to watch Bravo or USA, you were a subscriber to an MVPD, and you got access to that. And so what TV Everywhere is just an extension of that service. You're paying for Bravo on your massive television in your living room, and now you can you would now have Bravo everywhere you are. So if you need a Kardashians fix right now, it's probably what Bravo has on, or Real Housewives, you can pop it up right now and get your fix sitting in here. So it's just an extension of that service, and that service has always had advertising in it. It's always been an ad-supported medium as well as a sub-fee medium, and that is partly because the sub-fee piece varies widely between services, from probably zero or negative to ESPN. TV Everywhere is just an extension of that, and I think I think a lot of the services going forward, I mean, Sling has advertising in it, even though it's a quote-unquote pure over-the-top service. That is, you pay whatever you pay a month, and the channels and the VOD assets come with advertising. So, I mean, that's sort of the model.
So let me follow up on that, and then I know, Caroline, you wanted to say something, I'll come back to you. But so one of the advantages of over-the-top services is you have a direct-to-consumer connection. So there's data that you get when you have an OTT service that you don't get in television. You don't have that end user data at all. In TV Everywhere, do you get that? Do you get that data? And if so, how valuable is it to you? Caroline says you do.
I see it.
So I would say that most IP delivered platforms have a set of data that can come with them. I would say that that most authenticated. Sorry, I'm parsing here. Forgive me. So there is certain sets of data that in a TV Everywhere environment we don't get. So I don't get that Jim has logged in and Jim is sitting at 251 Park Avenue in his penthouse. So I don't get that level of information. That information belongs to my distribution partners, the MVPD partners. That there are lots of rules and regulations of which I am not an attorney, so I won't delve into that. There's protections around that for consumers. And so they do not choose to pass that to me. But if you are in a browser and if you've logged into NBC.com, I certainly have that type of information. I have whatever general cookie targeting information that everybody sort of has on the web. So certainly I say most of the IP delivered video experiences, you should be able to have a more targeted ad experience. Different levels of that.
So that's one of the things I find very ironic. Most of those services are subscription, and yet that end user connection is most valuable when you're selling advertising. Now, it's very valuable to Netflix. They do an amazing job of data, but having that data is most valuable for an advertiser. And Caroline, you're thinking, you have a thought?
Well, I've had lots of thoughts sitting there chewing on my tongue. The data stuff is incredibly interesting, and what we've recognized over the last 5 years is that people are, particularly the MVPDs and the networks, are beginning to understand the word sharing. Sharing data. Yes, exactly. I think the better relationships I've seen out there are ones that acknowledge that two people own the same transaction, the content provider and the distributor, and seeing traffic sharing or data sharing agreements come forward, I think benefits the industry on many levels. Well, the other part of the question was the
We're
ads.
talking about using data for ad targeting.
Yeah, so I've sat center at this point. I was a seller when I was at Dish and did addressable advertising, which is where I know Chris from, as well as the Sling work and the adaptive bitrate stuff that was brought to market. It is a huge burden for any distributor to take on data in its entirety, in addition to making that decisioning real time for targeting advertising. So my experience points towards outsourcing the things that take longer to figure out, and a lot of folks have figured out ad tech, programmatic, and how to best use some of the data in the currency realm. Certainly keeping a handle on your own data for internal diagnostics for content value should be done, but I definitely think that the ad piece should be put out into the industry to establish with the IAB, with the MRC, the types of currency to support the content.
And I think you've seen all of the network groups and networks in this upfront season as they're, the announcement started in kind of January with everyone has a set of data or another set of data and a data platforms and stuff to help with targeting across, again, traditional linear television to various levels. There are technologies out there that can do one-to-one set-top box individual ad insertion in linear television. They're powered off of sets of data. So there's lots of data sets out there. My point was only that I don't have individual subscriber information that I can match Jim to that Jim is the person that authenticated on my services.
Right. And I don't live at 251 Park Avenue, in case anyone took notes. So Helga, I'm going to come to you. So OTT and IP delivered video is different in that there's an incremental cost for every viewer that's added. When Chris, whether it's NBC broadcast or whether it's even a cable network, you have zero incremental cost for adding a viewer. But that's not true in OTT. So talk a little bit about that and how that might affect the fact that these are all subscription services instead of ad services, because at least you're guaranteed the subscription.
That's a very good point. And I think the economy right now on running OTT services, we see there is a lot more feasibility economically with doing subscription services. The prices you get and the loyalty you get from people to an ad service, really, it's a bit of a struggle to get it to be profitable. But the other thing you talked about here, like the incremental cost. Incremental cost of each viewer is a challenge for anyone doing OTT, and it's one of the things that Ash and I have been discussing a lot with iFlix, which is a really big scale playing game where the numbers are just growing incrementally. And I don't know if we could talk about openly a bit of how we discuss this.
Yep.
So basically, it makes a lot of sense to go to the existing CDNs when you start an over-the-top service. It's a fast way of getting good quality streaming video out there to the audiences. But once you hit a certain scale, you have to start thinking like, how can you decrease that cost? Because that cost is now one of the biggest costs.
It is the biggest variable cost.
Yeah. So rights and CDN. So basically what we have done together, and we've done this before as well, and we did it in Europe as well, was building up your own CDN infrastructure. And there is a sound economy to set up here, because you can put out boxes into ISP's networks that will allow them to have better control over the streaming of their network infrastructure, and giving you less of a cost, because and this is the way most CDNs actually sell in their data structure into the ISPs of the world. And when you get to a scale of iFlix or others, you really can do that yourself. And that helps driving down, and suddenly it becomes a CapEx and not an OpEx, and it's not it's it's a totally different scale when it comes to CDN cost.
And obviously, that's interestingly one of the differences. If you look at a comparison between HBO and Netflix, one of the big differences in their financials is the fact that Netflix has incremental costs of delivery, which HBO does not, in their legacy, not in HBO now, but in their legacy service. And if you look at that and think about the fact that in prime time, according to Cisco, in prime time, 37% of all internet traffic in the United States is just Netflix, just all by itself. Somebody's paying for that traffic somewhere, right? And that someone's got to account for that. And that's not the case for HBO, so they end up with higher margins for the same kind of content. So speaking of content, Ash, you have a fairly broad offering in your service. Right?
Yeah, we've got 20,000 hours or thereabouts of content in our service.
Yeah. So of those 110 or so that are out there, some of them are really, really narrow. How narrow can you go? How broad can you go? And what are the implications of the two?
It's a very interesting question. On the narrow side, it's not something which I've particularly looked at, but I'm sure that there can be models which can be probably more premium models which can work there. We're very much gone for the broad side. I mean, for us, it's a scale play. It's all about bums on seats, really, and getting as far and wide as possible. In the emerging markets, quite different to the US, for example, you've got piracy rates which are running at around 90%. You've got interesting things like bandwidth is not reliable. Payment methods are all, you've got 80% credit card penetration in the US. Probably there's about 18% in Malaysia, and that's one of the more advanced countries. So these are all interesting problems in emerging markets to try and solve. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Chris?
I mean, there are very niche services in the U.S. I mean,
CISO.
the ones off the top of my...
I'm sorry.
I was going to say the ones off the top of my head are kind of sports driven. I mean, there's a tennis offering. There's MLB baseball. There's now going to be this sliver of football that you can, get your favorite team or whatever. So, I mean, those are very niche and they're priced accordingly.
Right. On Curiosity Stream, which is the old Discovery Reborn, and all these are very narrow. But so talk about CISO for a little bit. CISO is not that narrow, and it's produced by, a pretty big company. Why do it? Why is a company motivated to try to go and do something like launch CISO? Why would an NBCU want to do that?
Well, first disclaimer: I was not part of the team that made the decision that greenlit that. But no,
But you've got the 4 letters on your card. So
no,
you
that's fine. I
answer
just
the
wanted
question.
to just be clear. No, I think you look across what NBC Universal's doing. I mean, they're trying a lot of different things. I mean, I think the nice thing with a digital over-the-top service is I don't want to say it costs nothing to launch, but it costs nothing to launch. I mean, compared to a broadcast network, I have, over 500 satellite dishes sitting across the country, racks of equipment at every person. I'm paying for a couple birds up in the sky to bounce things off of. So, I mean, it's infinitely cheaper than that. So why not go try things? Why not go try something? We have a lot of great comedy content. We have the ability to create a lot more with the talent and the resources we have. Why not try something fun? We've got a service in kind of Western Europe and Australia, New Zealand, and probably a couple other places. I think it's Hey Ya, that is an amalgamation of a bunch of the reality shows that we have. So think Real Housewives, Kardashians, and other Emmy-winning, great content.
Is that daytime? Or is that, I need to know which Emmy it is. I'm kidding.
The content's there. We've got the rights, the licensing to it. Why not go experiment and try these different things? What we can learn. We can learn how does a small over-the-top play, direct-to-consumer play work with CISO, as potentially knowledge and understanding for what you may or may not do in the future. So, I mean, I think we try a lot of those things. I think there's been a variety of different apps that we've tried. We've been on the fourth. We're big enough and have the ability to try stuff, many of which hasn't worked. Canoe.
I used to work at Canoe. That was a cut.
goes both ways. No, but we've tried a lot of different things. Many of things that we've invested in, but we thought were going to be ginormous and haven't worked out. But we try these things to learn from them and see what aspects of them do work that we want to carry forward, and what pieces of them maybe don't work that we'll try and reform in version 2 or 3.0.
Sure, and it is a great way. I also used to work at A&E. I look at the History Channel. They just launched theirs, which is the Vault. These networks, any of the cable networks that have these huge libraries, why not turn them into new programming offerings, right?
Yeah.
Perfect, right?
Another thing I work on is some of our daytime syndicated stuff. We have shows that have been on the air for 20 years or longer. And you think those are daily shows, so every year are producing, not 100 hours, but maybe 25 or 30, 40, 50 hours, a year. The library there is huge that you could do something interesting with, and
right.
So.
But it's such a new area, and as you said, the cost of getting into it is so low. So why not try it? I don't think anyone really knows what is going to work or what sets of things are going to work. It's a matter of getting out there and trying. Given the barriers to entry being so low.
So as this expands, right, I like to talk about unbundling to rebundle, right? I mean, we're seeing skinny bundles, we're seeing people go over the top, but now we're starting to see it rebundled. Amazon has come back and has streaming partners, and they're going to put it all back together. iFlix is a broad offering, CISO is a narrow offering. Where do you think this is going? Do you think we're going to find somebody like an Amazon, or is it going to be somebody else is it going to be Comcast? You don't have to answer that one. Or so who is it going to be to pull these back together again? Because are we really going to want to write 10 different checks every month?
Well, I think that's the advantage, especially the way Amazon has laid it out. You still know, it's still line item. I know that I'm paying whatever all the different line items are, but it's one bill to Amazon. There's some advantage to that of being able to do that.
Yeah. So, Caroline, let's talk a little bit about some measurement, and then specifically, as things are starting to come online, like Sling TV and Sony View, and Hulu's announced theirs, and YouTube has announced theirs, how are we going to measure that? Because it is advertising supported. Yeah. How are we going to, but it's also a subscription. How are we going to measure that? What is measurement going to look like across all these devices and the networks? Is it going to make everybody's head at Chris's company explode to try to figure this out?
It is extremely tough. I mean, day in and day out, every time a new platform, a new player comes in, we have to make sure that the data, the events are being recorded and passed around so folks can share the data and come up with it. To do it fairly, I mean, there's two perspectives. One is following the content or the ads, which are, it's really one perspective, but you might think of it as two, because you can have ads all over different contents and you want to aggregate the view to it. But the other side of it is the person or the home. And that is a different view of the content and the consumption. I think when you talk about the pendulum swinging back and forth between repackaging and dispersing, it is about that differentiation between a person and a home. Mm-hmm. A person decides for themselves all those different assets that they want to view, where home is a container that is often associated with a single subscription. And different data points are related to homes versus people and devices. And as you go to measure a whole home, you have 20 some odd devices that you're trying to bring into a holistic perspective. And you have to do, the ideal is to do that in the home and follow those mobile devices when they're outside of the home and back. Mm-hmm. So it is incredibly difficult. We implement a policy where we say yes to every data point. If a partner wants to give us a data point, we say yes, and then we go to find the ones that we don't have. So we get census-based tags. So if you put on the tags for your content, the census-based events are sent over to us. We also take streaming events, meaning all server-based events that come to us, and we'll make sense of that. On a census level. We get the set-top box data, which is every single channel change, and we have the correlations to know what's happening there. And for each player that comes down, we have every single SDK that goes in each of the players. So there's a lot going on. But then the last thing is really panel-based, is trying to understand who is in front of that content no matter what it is. We have over 1 million in the US, 2 million worldwide for our PC panel. Our mobile panel is in the tens of thousands, growing. I don't want to quote any numbers in case they're not public. And we have another, we have a TV panel as well, the 70,000 persons. And then for this total home is a new project that we launched and have been public about, so it's not news to everybody. It's called Total Home Panel, which is a router, basically a router sniffer, just call it, you know, basically what it is. It with the participants' permission, all the data that goes through the router is passed to us for interpretation. And when you marry that data, which uses every connected device, to other data like ACR, which is basic auto content recognition, automatic content recognition, you can see what's on and how it was delivered and marry that all together for a holistic view. So I know that's a lot, but it takes census-based, it takes streaming, and it takes panel and data sharing. So it takes more than a village to get the measurement.
So what have you seen out of all of that this year that surprised you?
You know, I don't want to dampen the enthusiasm for all of this new.
Well, this is the business panel. Dampen away.
Because it means business to us to have more confusing things to figure out for folks. So please keep going. But you know, we're seeing a lot of fragmentation and expansion. I don't see how that can continue on. We're going to see consolidation. We're going to see an absorption of what's working into bigger stuff. The Comcasts, the NBCUs of the world are going to continue to succeed in those kind of strategies of bringing stuff back together, dispersing it out and bringing it back together. But the majority of viewing, if you just look at minutes viewed, it's still so much content is being viewed on television in the realm of, you know, I would be hard-pressed.
By television, you mean linear television and DVR?
The big TV in the household, linear DVR, VOD, it's basically the MVPD accessed or even over-the-air content is 70-80% of all viewing. I mean, that's being generous to the other side. You know, so we're seeing between 1, 2 to 20% viewing in a digital asset for a TV everywhere asset.
Right.
So I'm throwing out a lot of strange things, but any given content can break the rules across the board, where the dominant viewing is time shifted, whether it's DVR, VOD, or any digital over the top.
And it's interesting that, again, we're back to the definition of TV, right? Because people are watching Netflix on their big TV. 70 or 80%, or 60, 70% of both Hulu and Netflix are watched on big screen TVs, not on mobile devices, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, those are their numbers, so I'm quoting them. And the other thing that we've seen, which has been really interesting this last year, and I'm leading up to the VOD discussion, is how much time shifting has impacted what we typically call ratings, right? A C3, a C7, if you're not from the TV world, we'll get you up on that. But in the first 7 days after viewing, big shows like Quantico would be flops if all you did was measure their live viewing, right?
Yeah.
So all of that shift is pointing in more and more towards on demand, which doesn't that point us more and more to over the top?
It does.
Olga, were you?
Yeah,
you
so
were gonna
which
say
is the
something,
same we've experienced in many of the markets we're in. And if we look at Europe, where things happened really early, where you had over-the-top services like 15 years ago, we see now that drama series, for instance, is starting to have more viewing on OTT services than of broadcasters than on the linear and the time shifted combined. We see more people watching sports online than watching sports, premium sports on television. We're seeing this shift happening. I'm an old journalist. I have tons of friends who used to work in papers. I used to have 3 to 4 papers that I subscribed to. Right now, all I have is the New Yorker and Wired magazines. But the thing is, I remember a lot of my friends saying, we just have to be smarter, we just have to be better at what we do, And these declining numbers we see, like 3 to 4% every year, it's dramatic in a way, but it's not killing us.
Okay.
It's now come to the point where newspaper industry has been gone through this democratization process, where it's been so easy to reach the audience with the written word. And we're seeing the same with television now, that television is easier to reach the audience, and it's more democratized than it used to be. And that influences the way the whole industry and the whole business works. I wouldn't bet on the newspaper industry today. Nobody would. And we should be prepared to think like a few years ahead and plan now. And I think Chris is totally right. We need to be able to do experimentations today. If you don't, I wouldn't bet on you, because things are going to change, and it's not obvious that the ones that are successful and doing incredibly well today are the ones that are successful and doing incredibly well tomorrow. And I think there is a lot of industries where we've seen this democratization going on, where you see these fundamental changes happening, and it's going to hit us as well. And I love TV, and I've been in broadcast all my life. It'd be so easy to just stay where we are and think the way we do, because we love it. We can't.
So I'm going to ask
and it
everybody.
is changing, and you see the Jim's numbers are pretty radical. And if you look at the millennials, and this is a cliche, but look at the numbers. Look at like young male population of the US, how the decline has been like 50% viewing time. 50% over the last decade. So it's happening. And I remember newspaper people saying to me that, yeah, young people don't read newspapers. But once they get kids, they want to subscribe to a newspaper again. They don't talk like that anymore. Not at all. Because once you change your habits, they're changed.
So that's a really interesting point that see if we have time to come back to. I want to ask each of you sort of one last, and I want 2-sentence answer, right? This is your crystal ball opportunity. So, so what do you see? Where is this going to go? Where is IP-delivered video going to fit into the world of legacy and all of those things in the next, let's just say 3 to 5 years, because beyond that, who knows? And Chris, I apologize, I should have used Blind Spot instead of Quantico because it worked the same way. But why don't we start with you?
I don't think anybody is denying that again, I'll call it IP-delivered viewing of our content is going to continue to grow. I don't think anybody's going to pretend otherwise. So for us, it's about how do you continue to monetize that? I mean, you were talking about data and ratings and stuff like that. I'm always cognizant to look at, there's 2 sets of those numbers, meaning there's the content itself. So how many people actually watch the content, which for Netflix may or may not even matter. They just care if you pay your subscription. And then there's how many ad impressions are you able to deliver, and what's the value of those? And so, for us, it's making sure that we continue to get the full value for our content as it moves from one platform to the other. And there are lots of different ways to do that.
Right. Before we go to Ash, I just want to let you know, we'll open the floor for questions in just a minute. I just want to wrap up here. So Ash, what's your couple sentence look at the future?
I think we're clearly seeing that people want what they want, when they want it, where they want it. And so more and more we're going to be seeing, I think, successful delivery of things when they're personalized. And obviously the internet is the easy way to do that. So yeah, it's all about personalizing the experience.
Okay. Helga?
Yeah, I think you know what I
Don't
think
find
of
it.
this.
That's an answer, move on.
Yeah.
Sell your newspaper stock. Okay. Caroline?
Experiment. That's the thing. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to change.
Let the data
Yeah.
tell you.
Yeah.
I think as the folks experiment and as individuals who have produced in the video, primarily in video, and aspire to walk up the chain to higher CPMs for ad-supported content, that is where a lot of the industry is talking right now. Is TV wants to hang on to their premium rates, and digital wants that that audience, and they want the rates.
$70 billion looks very attractive.
It does indeed. So I think the struggle will be to prove the value of the lesser. I don't mean to imply lesser, but the smaller content as it tries to aspire. I've seen some arguments recently that you don't need scale to be successful today, but certainly on the advertising realm you do. So if that's your business model, walking it up and measuring properly, that is your benchmark. It is, to me, everybody's still trying to be TV, even though it's not defined.
One of the things I find really fascinating, everybody, talks about how YouTube is so great and everybody jumps on YouTube, but all the big YouTube stars want to get on TV, right? That's where you want to end up, is on TV, right? Whatever TV is, you want to end up on TV. So, questions from the audience? Yes.
So every month, I'll spend somewhere between, say, $125 on access between mobile, broadband, another additional $100, $125 on bundled, aggregated content from cable stuff, and maybe $50 on over-the-top, direct Netflix, App Store kind of stuff. How does that overall wallet change 5 to 10 years from now? How does the allocation within that wallet change 5 to 10 years from now?
So let me just repeat the question for the audio. The question was, I'm spending a lot of money on access, broadband, on all of that, and spending money on subscriptions. How does that wallet change in 3 to 5 years? Anyone?
I just have a sarcastic answer, sorry. I'm owned by a distributor who owns the pipes to your house, so I kind of want that wallet to just get bigger, but yeah.
I think it's going to, I don't think it's going to go down. I think you're going to be enticed to keep on getting choices to entice you to spend more.
Not me, but growing. I'm an old
Yeah. So the question is, what about the upcoming generation, the millennials and the folks under the millennials?
It is the same. Every kid says, not every kid, but we give the games, give the certain content. Mom, can I get this? Can I have the subscription to this? Can I, I want to have this asset because everybody, this show, this programming because everybody else does. It's still that kind of environment, but the overall television or video gaming is included is addictive behavior, and that I think that will be propagated going forward for the likes of the guy at the end and hopefully content creators going forward. So I don't see the dollars going down. I think what you're seeing is a reshuffling and a redefinition so someone else can actually be notable and participate. We talked about perhaps Dish's influence in the industry where it's a disruptor. And I mused whether that was on purpose because disruption might be a competitive advantage. Reduce the leverage that one competitor has, and then there's opportunities for many more. So I think that we'll see a lot of ping-ponging back and forth between the access and the content. I see them actually going to be closer and closer. I think Comcast has been a successful demonstration of that.
And I think the other interesting piece is we're not only going to see share of wallet, but share of hours, because there's only so many hours. It's continued to expand slowly but surely every year, but there's still a limited number of
Share of
time we can be in
minutes.
front of some screen or another. Yes?
Where does the old FCC adage of public service and news fit in? Sitting in Philadelphia, home of television, we love our news, right? And local news.
Mm-hmm.
Would I ever see local news on iFlix or over the top? And NBC, what happens there?
So the question, again, to repeat it, is what happened to the FCC public service requirement, and will we see things like news and local start to show up on OTT services? So Helga, and then I'm going to go to the NBC guy.
The great thing about monopolies, more or less, especially when the state controls something to give to those monopolies, is that it also can ask for something in return. And that is news, for instance. Yeah, and that's the fundamental of the news broadcast industry in the US, but also in many markets. That's a very good question, and a question that concerns me. What happens when you no longer have this resource, this scarce resource that are given out like that by the government? How do you ask for something in return? And actually, if you look at some countries like Norway, that's a discussion in parliament right now, and they're really trying to figure out how to make this work. And they made a temporary law that was announced last week, where they asked for kind of a new way of thinking license towards people who would be willing to create news in a commercial way outside of the capital of Norway. So it's a very interesting discussion, absolutely, and it's one that's hard to really see the solution of.
Chris, your company has hundreds of affiliates that are in that business. What do you think?
So I'll start by saying I think there are companies out there that are purely, I mean, there's Vice, which if you've ever watched some of the news produced by Vice are they're very in-depth, deep stories, different, way of kind of coming at telling the news. The local, I think you were sort of alluding to the requirements of a local broadcast affiliate. We're committed to broadcast. It's in, I think it even says it, broadcasting. That continues to be a requirement. It continues to be something that both the affiliates that we own and the affiliates that are our distribution partners across the country take very seriously. What they do for their community by producing fantastic local news. It's one of the most valuable pieces of programming to an individual station is the local news that they produce. So I think that continues along with some of the other mandates that are out there, children's programming, et cetera. But it's not inexpensive to produce well, and so I think.
So what's going on with local affiliates and over the top?
So actually our TV Everywhere offering for NBC, there is take a half step back. There is no NBC. There are 230 plus local affiliates that you watch to get programming that is produced by NBC. So if you are in New York, you watch WNBC. If you are in Baltimore, you watch WBAL, which is the local affiliate who has assembled a bunch of hours from coming out of 30 Rock, but also a bunch of hours that they either source locally or produce locally. So our TV Everywhere offerings that you can watch on your phone or your iPad or your variety of other devices is that local affiliate. So if you were in New York, and if I pull up the NBC live stream on my phone right now, it is WNBC, just like if you were up in your hotel room and turned on your TV. So our NBC TV Everywhere product is our local affiliates, because that is what we are. Different from a cable brand, which is Bravo across the whole country, except for maybe 2 sets of time zones, but it's still the exact same programming everywhere. The broadcast networks are those, and that's something that we at NBC are committed to rolling out, is that we roll out our individual broadcast networks. We aren't, there may be some other broadcasters who are doing sort of segments of their national content only in different places.
I can comment. We have over 600 station clients, and we have been working with them over the last year for aggregating their mobile and OTT events and displays of all their content into a wrapped up total number. Amazon Fire already has some local content over the top. So what you're going to start seeing, and it's not strictly OTT is not widespread. When you look at Roku, Amazon Fire, the traditional larger players, but they are opening. There are some tests right now. They're beyond tests. They've hundreds and thousands of apps have been loaded and generating data on a daily basis, and I'm just from another meeting where it was one client that had several station groups across a couple different regions. That's successful, keep on going. We're going to see a lot more of that. So I think there is room, as long as there's appetite on the consumer side, to make that worthwhile. But certainly it's starting to show up in the OTT device environments.
It
Okay.
certainly plays into the government's purpose to have it more widely available. There's an emergency if I need to know something.
You-
On OTT.
The government,
Right.
it hasn't been I haven't run into that they're doing it because of the government.
Right, they're doing it to
it's-
save their audience.
They're doing it because there's an appetite from the audience, not from the government
Yeah,
perspective.
The question is, if you're going to get local news, where are you going to get local news? As the newspapers go away, who's going to end up winning? Do the newspapers take video and go out and shoot video because everyone wants video, or is it going to be the TV station? Somebody will win that. So, we have time for one more question. Yes.
Okay, considering how advertising has been so conducive to the monetization of TV programs and whatnot, I'm curious to know, and this question is not for you to not necessarily predict the future, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Where do you think branded content or product placement is going to be in the next few years, if any growth, you know?
Okay, so if I see if I summarize this well, given the shifts and all that are going on here around advertising, where do you see branded content and product placement and so forth ending up in the advertising world? Caroline likes it.
We have a business behind
Yes.
branded
Caroline will be happy to sell you a product for
That's
it.
right. See Caroline afterwards.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's from a consumer perspective. A lot of times people say, well, it's less interruptive, it's whatever. It's also just much harder to do. It's much harder for a giant advertiser to work and integrate a product into a show, even if it's as simple as a car. Because it's like, well, what angle of the car do you want? How much do I have to zoom in on the little logo as they drive away? In my former life, I worked on some of this stuff, and so it's not as simple. I think it will continue to grow. I think kind of the branded content, whether that's kind of custom advertisements or the Pepsi or Coke bottles on the table. Some of that stuff, which is maybe more blatant, is easy to do.
Do you think you might find sort of extensions of that model where you may actually have, with certain content, filming the same scene over and over again with different content and then inserting the ads in a seamless fashion to the content? I mean, is that type of thing a possibility?
Yeah, you could also do a lot of that digitally. I mean, when they do the replay, who knows? We may all have Coke cans sitting in front of us because that's all. It's actually that technology's existed for 10 years. So, I think you'll see it. Will you get back to where you've got the Texaco Star radio theater? Again, you see that in some places where there's, it's easy for a large brand to either sponsor content or produce special content for themselves. I mean,
Right. Well, but isn't Fallon basically, except for his skits, one long promo for somebody's show or movie or something? Never mind. You don't have to answer that.
No, the only reason Tom Cruise comes to New York and sits with Jimmy Fallon and the other guys is to promote something. He doesn't come for fun.
It's branded content, right?
I mean, in many ways, a lot of that stuff is, any of the kind of talk show
course it
guests
is.
are always,
Right,
something.
but
There's some quid pro quo.
You don't think Fallon's going to stand up like the old days and actually do an ad, though? He would if you paid him. All
It's
right,
like, you haven't watched Fallon much lately. No, I mean, everybody does it, and a show like Fallon is easy to do. Fallon can have a Ford F-150 drive onto the set and be part of a skit. I mean, that's easy to do. It's a little harder to do with, a high-end scripted show like, Chicago Fire. Like, how do you feature a Ford F-150 in Chicago Fire without it being just
Blatant.
gross?
Right. Well, then to that
I
point,
mean, the Coke cans on the American Idol by the
Got
last
larger.
season
Got bigger,
were like
yes,
55
exactly.
I mean,
But to that point, the 409 scripted shows that are on the air, God, I can't even use that word, that are being produced, a lot of them have that. House of Cards has them, Orange, a lot of these shows. So the things that look like television, back to our first question,
it's had it for
doesn't
years.
matter how you deliver it.
Was it ET where it has an AT&T phone? There's a logo on the bottom of the phone in ET.
Yeah.
AT&T never put a logo on a phone there ever in their life except for that movie. I mean, there's been branded content trade outs, those kind of things in shows forever.
Forever.
I think that will continue. You'll continue to see that. Certainly, I think the goal of anyone in advertising and data is to have less disruptive advertising. If I can produce better, more targeted ads that are relevant to you, it's more like content than it is an ad to you. So if you're in the market for a brand new pickup truck, a great ad about all the features of the new Ford F-150 is not really disruptive and bad to you because you're kind of like, ooh, I didn't know that.
Right. Helga, you were...
I think it's growing too, and I think it's growing because of your reasons, like it's not so disruptive. But I think it's interesting to see what Amazon does, because that's like one of the biggest shops in the world bringing content in, and to see what they will do to this, having both the distribution of content and also the production of content and the whole shop there. So maybe you'll start to see not only product placement in the way that you have to agree on certain angles.
Well, they produce an entire fashion show that's all merchandise that's theirs to
and you
sell.
see the X-ray functionality they have, where you now can go in and see like who's the actor in every scene, and you can see trivia and stuff like that. And I'm sure pretty soon you're gonna have links to like buy the car.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when it
Okay.
comes down to it, branded entertainment only works as if they can tie it to sales. You tie it to awareness, you tie it to consideration, purchase, and for ad-supported content, which I've spent much more of my career thinking about, it is all back to, did it move product? And branded entertainment has begun to come up with enough data to show the impact on awareness, show the impact on purchase. And as these data sets get larger and larger, when you can get direct attribution of an exposure to branded entertainment all the way through to purchase, the modeling has gotten extremely strong on saying what kind is working. Whether it's on screen for X amount of time, the emotional connection, all these elements that get added to the consideration for branded entertainment. But at the end of the day, it's all about, does it sell the product? And I think that as that gets better, you'll see a higher investment into branded entertainment.
My wife, who is a avid Christmas movie watcher on the Hallmark Channel, has a little game she plays to see how many times she sees the Folgers coffee, which is in every Hallmark Christmas movie you can watch for it. And so she has a little game she plays at home, keeps track on a
And
whiteboard.
do you drink more Folgers during the holidays?
Not even close. So we've run over a little bit. Thank you all very much for being here. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you gained some insights. And thank you very much to our panelists. And cocktails are in the exhibit hall. Thank you.